pretty heavy episode of Sundays with Subscribers this week. And it's an issue I care quite a bit about because it's just one of those, like, either you're using common sense or you're not issues. So we had on a young woman, 24 years old. Her name is Lily Peden. She lost her 2-year-old daughter who died after ingesting fentanyl. So her 2-year-old daughter, Nanny, had been dropped off for a visit at Nanny's dad's house. The two of them weren't together, so was going there for a visit. And her dad had had some substance abuse issues. Lily did not believe that those were ongoing. And then Nanny got into something containing fentanyl pills, ingested quite a few of them, and ended up dying. Just a devastating story. So Nanny's dad was sentenced to 8 years in prison over it. But this story came up, actually we'd first heard of Lily and Nanny in a King 5 story. So King 5 News had done a story looking at some bipartisan efforts in Olympia to try to increase protections for kids against fentanyl use in the home. You know, some of our laws are really outdated. Like there'll be protections and increased punishments if you have meth around kids, but like not fentanyl. And so they're trying to update all those statutes, and Democrats on the far left are like, no thanks. You know, we don't think if a parent's abusing drugs, you know, they still deserve to have their kid around. I mean, really, this is pretty insane stuff. And so in this King 5 story where we saw, this is why we wanted to have Lily on, because we saw her in the King 5 story, the reporter had sat down with Representative Roger Goodman, who's the chair of the Public Safety Committee, who wasn't letting any of these bills get a hearing. It was like there were so many bills, even bipartisan bills, put before him to try to better protect kids from drug-abusing parents, and he just wouldn't give them hearings. And he said this, he had this crazy quote on King 5. Here's a clip from that story.
Representative Roger Goodman is the committee chair. He says the state doesn't want to charge parents, which would separate them from their kids, and that historically, criminalizing drugs disproportionately affects people of color.
Many grieving parents, grandparents tell me it feels like the state is protecting the adult and the child who died is not getting justice, that their life does not matter. What do you say to that?
There have been so many tragic incidences with families and children exposed to these substances. If you're committing a crime, you need to know you're committing the crime. And so many of these people who are suffering from a severe substance use disorder have no idea what's going on. And the question that many of my colleagues have is, do we want to attach criminal liability to someone who is suffering from a substance use disorder, even if someone else may be harmed?
Yes. Yes, we do. Who even says something like that? Oh, well, they're so high on drugs, they don't know better and they killed their kid. Do we want to attach criminal liability? Yes, Representative, yes, we do. This is the guy in charge of the Public Safety Committee. That's an insane thing to say. So after that story was done, Lily Peden had obviously watched the King 5 story, and that's when she saw those clips within the same story of Representative Roger Goodman. And I mean, this is a 24-year-old woman, right? And she's gone through this horrible ordeal losing her daughter. But even she, who wasn't politically interested or involved before this, even she could watch that and think to herself, that is a guy who has no idea what he's talking about. So Lily Peden joined us on Sundays with Subscribers to talk about her ordeal, but we also had her react to that clip from Roger Goodman.
Honestly, since she passed, I mentioned that the only good thing that can come from a child dying is awareness to what leads to their death. And obviously in this case is fentanyl, but even more so it's, like you're saying, the way that politicians treat fentanyl. I've never really been much to follow politics, but I can't really say that I'm specifically Democrat or Republican because there's things on both sides that I heavily agree with and things on both sides that I heavily disagree with.
Yeah.
So I've kind of, I barely even watch the news besides the coverage of this, you know? So
what are some things that you've been surprised to learn when it comes to how politicians view fentanyl and children?
In general, I think I don't understand the not wanting to split up families thing. I don't think that just because you have a child, you're entitled to that child. If you don't act the way that you're supposed to raise that child, then you don't get to raise that child. I don't think that we should keep families together just because they're families. Obviously give them opportunities to fix it and become a better parent. But if they're just continually getting the cops called on them for using that with their kids with them, I don't think that they deserve to raise those children.
Yeah, so the Keeping Families Together Act, which has been the law for a few years now, Republicans have tried to undo it. They don't have enough votes to be able to do that. But, you know, the idea being that it's more harmful for a child if you pull them away from their parents than potentially being exposed to deadly drugs. And so they're saying essentially that even if there's drug use in the home, we're going to do what we can to keep a child in that environment. The Department of Children, Youth, and Families even started offering parents lock boxes where they could put their drugs. So
I mean, I suppose it's better than nothing.
Didn't get it, but it has to sound ridiculous to you.
It does. I think that they should do what they can to keep those parents in the child's life, but not necessarily the child in that parent's home.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot that you can do. You can have supervised visits with a grandparent or a caseworker or something to where they can still be in their child's life, and that child isn't completely void of a mother or a father, but they're not solely responsible for that child either, because they're proving to be irresponsible.
Well, and I've said it and it sounds devastating, but you can't keep a family together if someone in that family dies.
Exactly, that family is not together.
On the King 5 story, Representative Roger Goodman basically said, well, we don't want to criminalize something, that could separate a parent. What did you think when you heard his comments?
Well, before this story, had never heard of him. So I didn't do any more research into him, but just from what he said on there, it sounds like he, I don't know, hasn't been paying attention very much to those laws or any. It seems like he had limited information and was remembering from like reading one thing about this, or just barely reading, maybe even not reading about our story, my daughter's story. But it sounded like, I don't know it sounded like he didn't really know what he was talking about. It sounded like, I don't understand. He wasn't focusing on the fact that children are losing their life because of this. He was focusing on the fact that parents are having their kids taken away, which like I've been saying, if you don't act responsible, you should have your kids at least taken out of your home, maybe not taken out of your life, but taken out of your home.
Does it seem to you like they're prioritizing like a drug user's feelings or whatever it is over a child's safety?
Definitely. It seems like they're trying to make sure that the drug users don't do more bad, and so if we don't take their kids, they're not going to commit more crimes or something. I don't understand.
Yeah,
I don't understand keeping families together above all else.
Yeah, 100%. And it's kind of scary for you as someone who doesn't follow politics to watch Representative Goodman, who I've been very critical of, and say he kind of doesn't seem like he knows what he's talking about, because that's the chair of the Public Safety Committee. I mean, that is the guy who has refused to give some of these bills that would protect kids' hearings. I mean, he single-handedly can stop these bills really from moving forward, which is a pretty terrifying thing for you to look at that as a layperson in the criminal justice system and say, he sounds like he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, a lot of times I also watch him and I'm like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. You have a personal experience that I think is really important. And one of the things he's been accused of by me and others is failing to hear from survivors and victims and people who've been impacted by crime. He's very singularly focused on the perspective of the people who are committing crime.
I don't think that their perspective matters in this case. They're committing the crime. Like obviously don't treat them like crap. They're still a person, but they're the ones committing the crime. Why do we care what they think about how we're treating them?
Great question. I mean, this is a 24-year-old mom who really wasn't interested or active in politics at all, lost her daughter, horrible ordeal, and even she has the sense to say, why do we care how they feel about it? They're the ones committing the crime. Her the father of her daughter had fentanyl in a home with a child. She died from it. Why do we care how he feels? So here you have this young woman who has more sense than the chair of the Public Safety Committee. It's just stunning to me that they weren't able to get something done on this issue really in Olympia. And there were bipartisan efforts to do so. There were some common sense Democrats who were trying to push legislation forward, working with Republicans, and Roger Goodman, he's like the woke bridge troll. It's like, no common sense through here. Wild, wild stuff. If you want to watch that full interview with Lily Peden, you can do that by becoming a subscriber, undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. You can watch that episode and every episode of Sundays with Subscribers.